The massive lecture hall hummed with a strange mix of languages and sounds. Yeonji Park sat alone, her small frame almost invisible among the towering alien students. She was the only human in the entire Celestial Horizons Academy, a fact that didn't escape anyone's notice. To her left, a student with 6 eyes and blue-green skin whispered loudly to his friend, "Look at the human. So tiny, so weak." His translator device made the words clear and cutting. Yeonji kept her eyes forward, pretending not to hear. The academy was unlike anything humans had ever built. Its walls shifted between solid and transparent, showing glimpses of distant star systems. Gravity generators made each section feel different. Some areas felt heavy, others light as a feather. Students from 1,000 different worlds moved through these spaces like they owned them. But not Yeonji. She wore the standard gray academy uniform, which looked oversized on her slim body. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned the holographic displays that filled the lecture hall. While other students chatted or played with advanced communication devices, she sat perfectly still. The lecture was about interstellar diplomacy, a subject that usually bored most students. But not Yeonji. She knew every detail mattered. Her grandmother had taught her that survival often depended on understanding the smallest pieces of information. Professor Arya, a tall, silvery being with skin that looked like liquid metal, began the lecture. Her voice came through translation devices with perfect clarity. "Diplomatic relations are not just about words," she said. "They are about understanding the core of each civilization." Yeonji leaned forward, her notebook already filled with careful notes. Around her, other students barely paid attention. A reptilian student to her right was playing a holographic game. Another with 4 arms was braiding multiple strands of hair like tentacles. But something was different about this lecture. Professor Arya kept glancing at Yeonji, as if seeing something the other students couldn't. During a break, the harassment began again. A group of alien students surrounded her table. "Humans are so primitive," one said. "How did you even get into this academy?" Another laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Yeonji didn't react. She had heard worse. She knew something they didn't, a secret that ran deep in her family's history. Her grandmother's stories echoed in her mind. Stories of human survival. Stories of adaptation. Stories that most of these aliens had never heard. She looked up at her tormentors. "May I help you?" Her voice was calm, controlled. The aliens seemed surprised. They expected tears, anger, or fear. Instead, they found a girl who looked right through them. The lecture hall's massive windows showed a view of space, countless stars, swirling galaxies, distant planets. Yeonji knew her place was out there somewhere. Not just in this moment of ridicule, but in a future she would create. Little did the other students know, Yeonji Park carried a legacy that would soon change everything they thought they knew about humans. The xenohistory classroom buzzed with an uncomfortable tension. Holographic displays flickered with images of ancient civilizations, their rise and fall captured in stunning detail. Yeonji sat near the back, her fingers tracing the edges of her old data pad, a device that looked primitive compared to the sleek technology around her. "Today," announced Professor Kale, a tall being with skin like polished stone, "we will discuss the technological development of known galactic civilizations." His voice carried a hint of pride, as if his own species was at the top of this imaginary ladder. Yeonji raised her hand. "What about Earth?" she asked. A wave of laughter swept through the classroom. The reptilian student from her previous class snickered. "Earth? A backwater planet," he muttered. "Barely space-capable." Professor Kale's expression hardened. "Earth's history is complicated," he said carefully. "Not much is known about their early interstellar period." But Yeonji knew better. Her grandmother's stories echoed in her mind, tales of human resilience, of impossible challenges overcome. She remembered the old holographs, the stories of how humans transformed from a planet-bound species to interstellar travelers in just a few generations. My grandmother used to tell me, Yunji began, her voice steady, about how humans adapted quickly, how they solved problems that seemed impossible. The classroom fell silent, not a respectful silence, but one filled with mockery and disbelief. Professor Kale cleared his throat. Perhaps, he said, we should move on to more established civilizations. But Yunji wasn't finished. She pulled out an old data chip, a family heirloom her grandmother had given her. I have records, she said. Historical documents that show. Enough. Professor Kale's voice cut through the air. Personal stories are not scientific evidence. The other students exchanged knowing glances. Another human, trying to prove something. Another human being put in her place. After class, Yunji sat alone in the academy's massive central garden. Plants from 100 different worlds grew around her, some floating, some changing colors, some that seemed to breathe. She felt more alone than ever. A shadow fell over her. She looked up to see Professor Area, the liquid metal being from her first lecture. Interesting approach in class today, Area said, sitting down beside her. Yunji said nothing. She had learned that silence was often the best response. Most students would have given up. Area continued. Most would have stopped talking when the class laughed. My grandmother always said, Yunji replied softly, that giving up is the only true failure. Something flickered in Professor Area's eyes. Was it respect? Interest? It was hard to tell with her metallic features. There are stories, Area said slowly, that most galactic records don't tell. Stories about humans that have been carefully hidden. Yunji looked up, her heart racing. For the first time since arriving at the academy, someone was listening. Someone was suggesting there was more to her species' history than the mockery and dismissal. What stories? She asked. Professor Area's hand moved, almost unconsciously, to a hidden pocket. Not here, she whispered. Not where others can hear. The garden around them continued to breathe and shift. Alien plants swayed in artificial winds. And for a moment, Yunji felt something she hadn't felt since leaving Earth. A spark of hope. Something was coming. Something that would change everything. The next day, Yunji received a strange message. It appeared on her old data pad, a device most students at the Celestial Horizons Academy would have thrown away years ago. The message was simple. Meet me in the Archive Room 7. Bring nothing but yourself. It was from Professor Area. The archive room was hidden in the oldest part of the academy. Most students didn't even know it existed. Walls of ancient data crystals lined the room, each containing histories of different civilizations. Some were so old they glowed with a soft, pulsing light. Yunji walked carefully. Her footsteps made no sound on the smooth floor. The room felt different, heavy with secrets, thick with unspoken stories. Professor Area was waiting. Her metallic skin reflected the soft light of the data crystals, making her look like she was made of living light. Sit, she said. Yunji sat. Humans are more than what the galactic records show. Area began. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. Most civilizations believe humans are young, primitive, but I know different. From a hidden compartment, Area pulled out an old data crystal. It looked different from the others. Older, with a strange green glow that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. This, she said, contains records that most of the galaxy has tried to forget. The crystal projected a holographic image. Yunji saw something incredible. Humans, her people, solving problems that seemed impossible. A team of scientists transforming a dead planet into a living world. Engineers creating technology that could adapt to any environment. Military strategists winning impossible battles using nothing but creativity and determination. Your species has a gift, Area said. The ability to change, to adapt, to survive when no other civilization could. Yunji watched the images. Her grandmother's stories were coming to life. Stories she had thought were just family legends. Why are you showing me this? Yunji asked. Aria's metallic face showed something close to a smile. Because someone needs to remember. Someone needs to understand. The projection changed. Now it showed a massive technological threat, something that had destroyed entire civilizations. Huge machine-like creatures that consumed everything in their path. But in the corner of each image, humans were there, finding ways to survive, finding ways to fight back. The galaxy has forgotten, Aria said. But I remember. More images appeared, humans creating impossible solutions, humans adapting technologies from other species and making them better, humans finding hope when all seemed lost. Your people are not weak, Aria continued. They are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because of weapons, but because of how they think. Yunji felt something growing inside her. Pride, understanding, a connection to a history that had been hidden from her. What happens now? She asked. Aria's response was simple. Now you learn. Now you prepare. Outside the archive room, the academy continued as always. Alien students moved between classes. Holographic displays showed distant star systems. But inside this room, something important was happening. A human was about to discover her true history. A human was about to change everything. The simulation room was unlike any other place in the Celestial Horizons Academy. Walls that could create any environment. Challenges that tested the limits of every student's species-specific skills. Today was the critical test that would determine half the students' academic futures. Yunji stood at her station, surrounded by alien students who looked down at her. The challenge seemed impossible. A complex scenario involving 3 warring civilizations, limited resources, and a planet about to collapse. Professor Kale's voice echoed through the room. You have 1 hour, he announced. Your goal is to prevent total planetary destruction while maintaining diplomatic relations between the conflicting species. Most students looked confused. The holographic display showed a nightmare of technological and political complexity. Massive energy weapons, diplomatic tensions, limited time. The reptilian student next to Yunji laughed. Humans can't possibly solve this, he muttered. Yunji said nothing. She remembered her grandmother's lessons. Always look at the whole picture. Never accept that something is impossible. She began to work. While other students used complex alien technologies and followed standard diplomatic protocols, Yunji did something different. She started looking at the resources in unexpected ways. The energy weapons could be redirected. The diplomatic tensions could be used as a tool, not a barrier. Her fingers moved quickly across the holographic interface. She was combining technologies in ways no one had ever seen before. A weapon system became a communication device. A diplomatic restriction became a resource allocation method. The other students watched in confusion. Professor Kale's eyes narrowed. 15 minutes into the simulation, something amazing happened. Where other students had created complex, but ultimately failing solutions, Yunji was building something different. A solution that used the very problems as its strength. The planet in the simulation stopped its path to destruction. The 3 warring civilizations found a way to communicate. Resources were shared in a way that seemed impossible moments before. When the timer stopped, the room was silent. Professor Kale approached Yunji's station. Explain your method, he demanded. Yunji took a deep breath. I looked at the problem differently, she said. I saw the restrictions as tools, not barriers. Each limitation became a resource. The reptilian student who had mocked her earlier now looked shocked. The other alien students whispered among themselves. Professor Aria, watching from the back of the room, allowed herself a small smile. Impossible, muttered one student. But it wasn't impossible. It was simply a human approach to problem solving. The simulation results appeared. Yunji had not just solved the challenge. She had done so with an efficiency that was 300% better than any other student's attempt. Professor Kale cleared his throat. Unexpected, he said. But there was something else in his voice. Respect, perhaps, or the beginning of understanding. Yoonji packed her things quietly. She knew this was just the beginning. The first hint of something much larger was coming. Outside the simulation room, the academy continued. But something had changed. A human had just shown the galaxy something it had forgotten. Humans were far from weak. They were something else entirely. The data crystal felt warm in Yoonji's hands. Professor Arya had given it to her after the simulation, with a simple instruction: learn about your past. That evening, in her small academy dormitory, Yoonji connected the crystal to her old datapad. The room was quiet. Most students were at evening social gatherings, leaving the living quarters almost empty. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a holographic image appeared. An older woman stood there, her grandmother, looking exactly as Yoonji remembered her. But this wasn't a family photo. This was something else. If you're watching this, the hologram began, you need to understand our family's real history. The image changed. Now, Yoonji saw something incredible. Her grandmother, Park Yeon-soo, wasn't just a simple engineer. She was a quantum technology specialist who had worked on top-secret projects during humanity's first difficult years of space exploration. Holographic images showed complex technology, adaptive systems that could change and rebuild themselves, machines that learned faster than any artificial intelligence, and at the center of it all was her grandmother. We were never just survivors, the hologram continued. We were problem solvers, adapters. The human species has a gift that most other civilizations never understood. More images appeared, scenes of human teams solving impossible challenges. A team transforming a dead moon into a living environment. Engineers creating technologies that could adapt to any condition. Military strategists winning battles using nothing but creativity and quick thinking. Yoonji watched, her heart racing. These weren't just stories. These were real events that had been hidden from galactic records. The hologram explained how her grandmother's team had developed technologies so advanced that other civilizations had worked to suppress the information. Adaptive quantum systems. Communication technologies that could understand and translate any language in seconds. Survival technologies that could help humans live in the most extreme environments. The galaxy sees humans as young, her grandmother's image said. But we are something else. We are the species that turns problems into solutions. We are the ones who find a way when no way exists. Suddenly, the dormitory door opened. Professor Arya walked in, her metallic skin reflecting the holographic light. I see you're learning the truth, Arya said. Yoonji looked up. Why was all this hidden? She asked. Arya's response was simple. Because some truths are dangerous. Because some histories can change everything. The hologram continued. More secrets unfolded. Her grandmother had been part of a special team that developed technologies so advanced they could reshape entire planetary systems. Technologies that could adapt, learn, and grow faster than any other known civilization systems. Remember this, her grandmother's final message said. Being human is not about being the strongest. It's about being the most adaptable, the most creative, the ones who never give up. As the hologram faded, Yoonji understood something important. She wasn't just a student in an alien academy. She was part of something much larger. A legacy of human potential. A story that was just beginning. The alarm came without warning. Red lights flashed through the Celestial Horizons Academy. Students from 100 different worlds stopped what they were doing. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Professor Arya burst into Yoonji's study room. It's happening, she said. Her metallic skin seemed to pulse with an urgent energy. The consumption swarm has been detected. Yoonji knew about the consumption swarm. Every student in the academy had heard the stories. A technological nightmare that moved through space like a hungry machine. It ate entire civilizations, turned planets into nothing. No one had ever stopped it. The holographic displays in the academy transformed. They showed something terrifying. massive technological creatures that looked like a mix between machines and living beings. They moved through space, consuming everything in their path. Entire star systems went dark. The Academy's top strategists gathered in the main command center. Alien leaders from different civilizations looked worried. Their best technologies seemed useless against this threat. "We have detected the swarm's approach," announced the Academy's lead strategist, a being with 4 eyes and skin like polished stone. "Our defensive systems will not be enough." Young-ji watched quietly. She remembered her grandmother's lessons about problem-solving, about looking at challenges from unexpected angles. The holographic display showed the swarm's movement. It was like a living machine. Each part could adapt. Each piece could learn. Traditional defense systems would fail because the swarm changed faster than any technology could respond. Other students looked scared. The alien strategists looked defeated. But Eunji saw something different. She raised her hand. "I have an idea," she said. The room went silent. The 4-eyed strategist looked at her. "A human. You think you can solve this?" Eunji didn't react to the mockery. She had learned that actions spoke louder than words. She walked to the main display. Her fingers moved quickly across the holographic interface. She was pulling information from different sources: her grandmother's old research, the adaptive technology she had learned about, the unique human approach to problem-solving. The consumption swarm wasn't just a technological threat. It was a system. And systems could be understood, could be tricked, could be stopped. "Look," she said. The display changed. Young-ji showed how the swarm adapted, how it learned, how it consumed. But she also showed its weakness. Every system has a weakness. Every machine has a limit. The alien strategists leaned closer. What they saw was impossible. A human was finding solutions where they had seen only destruction. Professor Arya watched from the side. A small smile crossed her metallic features. "The swarm learns," Eunji explained. "But learning means having patterns. And patterns can be broken." Outside the command center, the galaxy waited. The consumption swarm moved closer. Entire civilizations held their breath. A human girl might be their only hope. And no one saw it coming. The Academy's main research hall buzzed with nervous energy. Young-ji stood at the center of a holographic display, her small frame surrounded by the most powerful beings in the galaxy. "The consumption swarm adapts too quickly," she explained. Her voice was calm, clear. "Traditional defense won't work." Alien strategists watched her. Some looked angry. Some looked curious. Most looked worried. Eun-ji began to show her plan. It wasn't about fighting the swarm directly. It was about understanding it, tricking it, breaking its ability to learn and adapt. She pulled up images from her grandmother's research, old human technologies that seemed simple but were incredibly complex, adaptive systems that could change faster than any known technology. "We can't stop the swarm," she said, "but we can confuse it." The holographic display changed. It showed multiple layers of false information, fake technological signatures, communication systems that would look like perfect targets to the swarm. "Psychological warfare," Professor Arya whispered from the side of the room. "Pure human strategy." Eun-ji's plan was crazy. Create multiple false targets, send out technologies that looked like easy prey. But these weren't just simple decoys. They were complex systems designed to lead the swarm away from real populations. The alien strategists argued. Some said it was impossible. Some said it was too risky. But no one had a better plan. The holographic display showed how it would work. Complex networks of false signals. Technologies that could change their signature faster than the swarm could adapt. Communication systems that would look like perfect targets. "The swarm learns," Young-ji explained. "So we'll teach it the wrong lesson." Her grandmother's research became key. Humans had always been good at survival, at finding solutions when no solution seemed possible. The plan had multiple layers: false technological signatures, adaptive communication systems, Decoy populations that weren't really populations at all. "This is madness," said one alien strategist, a being with 3 heads and skin like polished crystal. "No," said Professor Area. "This is human thinking." Yunji continued to explain. Each layer of the plan was carefully designed. Each false signal was a trap. The swarm would chase information that wasn't real, would follow paths that led nowhere. The Academy's main display showed the potential results. If it worked, the swarm would waste its energy, would become confused, would move away from real populations. "We're not fighting," Yunji said. "We're playing a game of misdirection." Outside, space remained dark. The consumption swarm moved closer. Entire civilizations waited. A human girl's plan was their only hope. The alien strategists looked at each other. Some nodded, some looked worried, but all of them understood one thing. This was something different. This was a human solution. And sometimes, different was exactly what was needed. The moment came suddenly. Massive holographic displays showed the consumption swarm's approach. Entire star systems held their breath. The alien defense forces had their weapons ready, but nothing seemed to work. Yunji's plan was about to be tested. The first wave of false signals went out, complicated technology patterns that looked like perfect targets. The swarm moved, but not how anyone expected. Instead of attacking directly, the swarm began to change. It started following the false signals, chasing technologies that weren't real, moving in directions that made no sense. Alien strategists watched in shock. "It's working," Professor Area whispered. The consumption swarm, a technological nightmare that had destroyed thousands of civilizations, was being tricked. Not by force, not by weapons, but by something more powerful: intelligence, creativity, adaptation. Yunji stood at the main control center. Her fingers moved quickly across holographic interfaces. She was not just watching. She was guiding, adjusting, making small changes that would have huge effects. The alien leaders who had mocked her earlier now watched with open mouths. The reptilian student who had laughed at her in class now looked terrified and amazed. More false signals went out, more complex technological traps. The swarm followed each one, getting more confused, moving further away from real populations. "How is this possible?" asked the lead strategist. Yunji didn't answer. She was working. Hours passed. The swarm continued to move, chasing signals that led nowhere, following paths that made no sense, a technological monster being outsmarted by human creativity. Suddenly, something amazing happened. The swarm began to break apart, not destroyed by weapons, not stopped by force, but confused, misdirected. Its adaptive systems overwhelmed by human creativity. Entire star systems that would have been destroyed were now safe. "Impossible," muttered one alien leader. But it was happening. The final stage of Yunji's plan worked perfectly. The swarm's communication systems became tangled. Its adaptive abilities turned against itself. It was like watching a complex machine slowly take itself apart. Professor Area looked at Yunji. "Your grandmother would be proud," she said. Yunji said nothing. She was still working, still guiding, still making small changes that would have huge effects. As the final signals went out, the consumption swarm was no longer a threat. It had been completely redirected, confused, sent spinning into a part of space where it could do no harm. The control center erupted in sound. Alien species from 1,000 worlds began to cheer. They had been saved, not by massive weapons, not by complex technologies, but by a human girl, by human creativity, by the ability to see solutions where others saw only problems. Yunji looked up. For the first time, she allowed herself a small smile. The galaxy would never be the same. The aftermath was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Yunji stood in the main chamber of the Galactic Strategic Research Division. Alien leaders from 1,000 worlds looked at her, not with mockery now, but with respect, with understanding. Her plan had worked perfectly. The consumption swarm was gone, not destroyed, not defeated in a traditional battle, but completely redirected, confused, sent spinning into a part of the galaxy where it would do no harm. "How did you do it?" asked the lead strategist, the same being who had once laughed at her. Eunji's response was simple. "I used what humans do best," she said. "We adapt. We find solutions." Professor Arya stood beside her. Her metallic skin seemed to glow with pride. "This is what I tried to tell you," she said to the other leaders. "Humans are not just another species. They are problem solvers." The holographic displays showed the full story. How Eunji's complex system of false signals and adaptive technologies had completely confused the consumption swarm. How a species most considered primitive had saved multiple civilizations. Awards were given. Medals were presented. But Eunji knew this was about more than personal recognition. This was about revealing the true potential of humanity. She thought about her grandmother, about the stories she had told, about the hidden technologies, about the lessons of survival and adaptation. "Humans are not the strongest," Eunji said to the gathered leaders. "We are not the most advanced, but we are the most creative. We find ways when no ways exist." The chamber was silent. Outside, space stretched endless and dark. Stars moved. Galaxies continued their slow dance. But something had changed. The galaxy had learned something important about humans, about a species most had ignored, most had considered unimportant. Eunji was offered a special position, the first human to lead a major galactic research division. She would help other species understand the human approach to problem solving. "I accept," she said simply. Professor Arya smiled. A real smile this time, not a metallic reflection, but a true expression of respect. As Eunji looked out at the star systems, she understood something important. Her journey was about more than herself. It was about showing what humans could do, about proving that creativity and adaptability were the most powerful technologies in the universe. A transmission came through. From Earth, her family was watching, proud. The academy that had once mocked her now celebrated her. The alien species that had considered humans weak now saw them differently. One human girl had changed everything. And this was just the beginning. In the vast darkness of space, humanity's true potential was finally being recognized, not as a weak species, but as the most dangerous and creative civilization in the galaxy.